Hello.
We're about ready to get started. Don, are you there?
I am, Jill. Glad to be on the call. And John, are you there? Jill, are you on the line? And you be muted.
Can you hear me, Don? I am indeed. Hello, everyone.
Excellent, loud and clear. And welcome, everyone, to our 5th annual webinar printed by both Concept Searching and Project Performance Corporation. Again, our final webinar on the Expert Webinar Series, Focus on SharePoint. And in this last one, we're actually going to go ahead and focus on content types. And with that said, we're going to actually focus on the 4 key content types. With me, you've just heard the people join in. I have 2 additional presenters, and actually they'll be doing the presentation. I will just be the host/MC. First, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Jill Henneman. Jill, are you there? And of course, can you give a little background about yourself as well?
Sure. I'm here, and good morning, everyone. My name is Jill Henneman. I'm a principal consultant with Project Performance Corporation. I work primarily with companies in the commercial and federal market spaces, primarily with SharePoint 2010, as well as other information management technologies, working with them to develop taxonomy, metadata solutions, content management strategies, information governance principles, and whatnot. And I am here today to speak with you all about content types.
And being that I've actually seen the presentation, I can't wait. It looks great. With that, though, I do have another presenter, and this presenter will actually be providing a demonstration. And what we'll be demonstrating today is how to work with content types. And not only how to work with them, but actually to ensure that you have an end user pick the right content type. And the way that you'll do that is we'll automate the process. But automating the process, not only will we be able to work with content types, but we'll actually be able to move content. So to present that for us will be the CEO, CTO, and founder of Concept Searching, John Chalice. And John, are you there? And can you give a little more background about yourself?
Yeah, I'd be pleased to. I guess I've been grappling with the problems of unstructured information for most of my career, and that's getting on for 30 years now. And more recently, really focused on search engines and metadata generation engines. As you'll see today in the presentation, we'll be covering both metadata generation and also the exciting new taxonomy workflow can tie into that.
Great. And, to just expand a little bit on the workflow, really what this allows us to do is to automate the ability to apply policy documents in a completely automated fashion. And again, John will be taking us through that in the webinar. With that said, we're going to go ahead and do a little background about each company, and then I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Jill, and Jill will again work with us and present the 4 key content types, as well as explaining, the strategic key concepts that you must know about creating content types. Concept Searching, we were founded in 2002, launching product in 2003. On the Fortune 1000 to begin with, but like every software company, we continue to expand, and we're slowly starting to get into the small and medium mid-market environments. We are a strategic partner for Microsoft, and really we are the go-to partner for auto-classification and taxonomy management. And really I like to call it now as term store management, because it's automating all the processes that you need to ensure that your term store works effectively. We are also a key partner for Microsoft as it relates to FAST, and so everything that we're going to show and talk about today, all of this metadata can easily be uploaded into FAST. And really from a product perspective, there's 3 key components. In order to be able to do this, you have to have a search component, and that product is called Concept Searching, and that's the tool that allows us to test and model what we're going to do. You have to have Taxonomy Manager, which is a place where we create the rules to do the classification, and we've actually had a webinar on that. There's Concept Classifier, which actually applies the metadata for the content for the end users. And again, we actually had a webinar on that as well. And so take all these pieces together, it gives you the ability to manage your metadata across the enterprise. Now, again, we're going to be focusing strategically today on SharePoint, and again, within the content type framework. But from a metadata perspective, that metadata can be leveraged across the organization. With that said, I'd like to go ahead and pass this over to Jill, who will provide a little background about PPC, and then we'll move forward with demystifying content types. Take it away, Jill.
Thanks, Don. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to tell you a quick few nuggets about PPC. We are a 1,200-person management consultancy. I'm based in Washington, D.C., but our headquarters is over in the UK near Oxford. We, as a firm, focus on four primary areas of expertise, so energy and environment, infrastructure, IT infrastructure design, information management, and enterprise solutions. So I sit within our information management division, where we really focus on management strategies for structured and unstructured data. And more particularly, we work with a lot of different technologies in order to help promote the management, knowledge retention, and knowledge searchability, findability for companies with their unstructured data. So you can see how each of these different capabilities within information management touch on energy and environment and policy design, infrastructure, as well as enterprise solutions. So we actually have our hands in a lot of the different areas of work that we have here at PPC, and we are a global company, so we work side as well as around the world on many different projects pertaining to information management and these other core areas. So today's presentation, Demystifying Content Types, where I'm going to take you through just a quick definition of content types. And I always think it's important to define why you want to use content types and understand the business logic behind when, where, and how you should use these content types. I'm getting into a bit of the anatomy of a content type, and for this, I'll take you through a few screen captures on, the different parts make up the content type within SharePoint 2010 to leverage those, and just a few best practices for managing content types within your environment. Then hit the four key content types that, in our experience working with many different companies, these are the four core content types that emerge in many different scenarios across companies of varying industries. I'm going to recap all of this with giving you a few tips and tricks for developing new content types, some of the processes that you would take in order to start thinking through what content type strategy should be, and some best practices that I want to leave you at the end with. So right into it, as far as what are content types, essentially what the definition is a reusable collection of settings to be applied to a certain category of content. The key phrase here is being reusable. So a content type saves these different settings that we would want to apply to a certain category of content that we want to use across the farm. And so this is really important because content types can span across different libraries and lists that occur in one collection. They can also exist throughout the farm in many different collections. And your content type is essentially kind of like a template. So whether you know it or not, everybody has used a content type or worked with it or seen one in SharePoint 2010 if you've touched SharePoint 2010. So by default, SharePoint 2010 comes with the document content type. And so this is pre-registered with any library and also any list whenever you create a new document within a new document library. Content type is just very simply, it's a blank canvas. And it doesn't provide any metadata structure, and it just gives you a blank Word new page in order to start typing in word processing. What we like to do is think through different strategies where we can create content types from this new document drop-down menu that can be tailored to your company to improve the consistency of different types of content that you may have within a certain document library. So why do you want to use content types? Well, one thing is for certain, it provides a centralized way of managing content in a meaningful way. So again, hitting back to the reuse and of different categories of content with specific settings. But we want to centralize the management of these content types so that we can make sure that we're implementing the same strategy across each collection or within the farm. Types can also help improve content management experience as well. So they also allow users to understand and know, okay, I got to use this template in order to create this document, and they know exactly where to go to, and it's built right into SharePoint 2010. Types can also help improve the searching, browsing, and filtering. So in essence, a content type is also another means of categorization. So like your term sets, like creating different term set columns within SharePoint to create that classification mechanism, content types become another column within a library, enabling yet another way of classifying content. It just applies more settings in a group format or in a template format for that type of content. But what you're able to derive from this extra bit of categorization is additional means of being able to filter the content within a library, being able to present and aggregate content types from across different libraries into one web part, and also improving the search if you have the content type being one of the key features or facets that a user can search against in order to find information. Another great thing that content types also provide is it allows you to assign and establish that certain metadata fields will always be applied to this particular type of content. And so you may want the metadata strategy within your document library to be very simple, but there are some content, there's certain content types that need to have a few metadata fields than the others for whatever business reason. And content types can allow you to apply a different set of strategy and content management principles to a type of content, even when it exists, coexists in the same document library with content that needs less categorization. So here are just a few business cases that I also wanted to share to help highlight and help illustrate ways that different companies are using content types. So Company A, they use their SharePoint for team sites for all their different projects. As the new project comes on, they create a new team site that the team can use to collaborate and store various different deliverables. However, this company also really wants to encourage staff to build upon past work. And so what they decided to do this was to design an approved project deliverable content type. Meaning, yes, within the team site there's going to be a lot of drafts, there's going to be a lot of other data that won't mean as much as the final deliverable. And so we wanted to isolate the final project deliverable in each of these different team sites. One, so they could search against them and have it pull from a bunch of different team sites. They also wanted to make sure that the project approved project deliverables had specific metadata fields assigned to them. So it's quite possible in the rest of the team site documents there's very little metadata applied, but we wanted to make sure that we were capturing key attributes for the approved project deliverable, such as author, technical expertise, and approved date. For Company B, they publish all of their internal policies through each individual department site. So each department authors their own policies, approves them, and then posts them on the intranet. So in order to increase the efficiency and the consistency of each of these policies, making sure they comply with HR regulations and making sure that the upper level management has a way of viewing and aggregating all the policies together, they decided to create a policy content type, which enabled them to have a specific Word document template that had different tables and different criteria that needed to be filled in for each of the different policies. So you can see how these different content type examples are really establishing templates and the reuse of these different content types across different areas of the farm. So when we start getting into where you can start manipulating and managing content types within SharePoint 2010, there is a site content types gallery within each site within SharePoint. So if you go to the site settings for the parent site, the root level site, or any of the children's sites, you'll see gallery site content types. That's one way to find it, but I always like to recommend to make sure that you're in the root level site for that collection. So being the highest level and making sure that all your content types can reach to the furthest distance of children or grandchildren sites that may exist in your site hierarchy for navigation. When you start to build a new content type, it's actually very simple, but there are a few areas where you do need to make some key decisions to make sure that you're setting up your content type to be to have the right characteristics and right framework to work within a specific part in SharePoint. And, very simple, your name and description. These are common aspects to SharePoint 2010 object creation. But the real key here is select parent content type and then also the parent content type dropdowns. So these are out-of-the-box templates, if you will, to help you create your content type template. So within SharePoint, you need to have a specific parent content type in order to have that content type work with a specific area in SharePoint. And what I mean by that is with our example on the screen, content types and then parent content type document. We know that this content type is now going to work within document libraries and will be a new document that can be registered in that new document dropdown. So we're creating a content type for documents in this particular document library. But also quite a few other different types out of the box that allow you many different options for creating a content type strategy within SharePoint 2010. The second red box that I've also highlighted on here is just the assigning of groups. And this is a common feature within SharePoint 2010. It allows you to create your own mechanism for organization. So there's a lot of default groups that SharePoint comes with that classify the different types of content types that are out of the box. But I always like to recommend you come up with your own management strategy that is appropriate to the content types and how you're using them and how you're rolling them out. So just another rule of thumb, organization is important to ensure that you always know what content types are a part of your own strategy. But going back to a minute to our default parent content types. So there are a bunch of different groups, and each of these different content types can help control and give you the content type that's going to work for a specific area within SharePoint. So I've already talked about the document example, but lists are also very common. So you want to have a content type for lists that ensures that certain data fields are applied to that content type, then a list parent content type would be what you would choose. And this goes the same for creating new document sets, article pages, publishing pages, folders, or you can also just create your own custom content type. So this is just a short list of some of the features, but these are some of the more common parent content types that you can leverage within SharePoint 2010 to create a template, a different way to collect the different settings for some of these reusable objects. So with article pages, for instance, if you are also looking through, or if you're trying to implement a strategy for templatized article pages for different blog sites that you may have in your SharePoint farm, you can create a template that has the branding, that has the right box allocations, and making sure that users, all the blog pages, article pages, have the same look and feel. So this is another way that you can leverage content types. But again, it's all about reuse and it's all about templatizing. After you've been able to create your content type, you are now able to manage the settings. And the settings are where you're going to start putting more definition into what features and what collection of settings you're going to apply to your content type. So these, we just have a short bulleted list of some of the features that you can manage with your content types. One is the document template. And the document template is actually really cool, so and also very, very simple. So when you go to Document Library and you new drop-down document and you select your content, there is a specific template that users should be using. It has your logo on it, has certain formatting to it. You can simply just take the saved file and upload it into the settings of your content type, and that will become the template for that particular content type. Workflow and policy and audit settings are also very important. It allows you to apply workflow just to that content type. So if there's special regulations, if there's a special retention schedule that needs to be applied to a particular content type, it can have a different workflow and a different way of being published than other pieces of content within the same library, and simply because you've assigned a workflow to that content type. So this is a way of having content exist in several different lists or libraries, but having a similar management schema because of the nature of what information it's capturing. Finally, at the bottom, you'll notice columns, but this is also where you can assign what metadata columns need to be applied to your content types, to the content being classified by this content type. So it can be more or less than the typical strategy that's applied across your site. Head into the 4 key content types. And so again, these are, we work with a lot of different companies, and we have gone through a number of different content type development and content type management strategy sessions with a lot of different companies. And these are the different areas that people are really turning to, that companies are really turning to during 2010 to help with that management. A lot of out-of-the-box features that actually help with these different types of content management these days, and content types are just another piece of that puzzle. So a company, document type, sensitive information, records, and then policy content types. So I'll go through each one with you and just give you a bit of background in some of the logic. And what I hope is that you are able to take away just some ideas on how to get started with your own content type strategy and how to roll this out. Again, these 4 content types span different industries and can really be applied, to any different type of company, bar you recognize what type of content needs to be applied to these different content types. So company document type, and what I mean by company document is that this is really a document or content type that replaces that generic document content type that comes out of box default with every library that you create. So, there's not a whole lot of value in that generic document content type. What I suggest here is that you actually just create a more company-specific, a more tailored specific content type for the generic content type that you use in all of your different libraries. And so this can be very simple. It will help enforce metadata fields across the site. So if you want to make sure that all your content in SharePoint is getting tagged with, the technical expertise, the department, and also maybe its file format type or something, you can make sure that you can replace the document content type with maybe your own company's content type. And so you can see in the screen capture that I've applied a PPC document content type to our document library, and I'm going to remove and enable the document generic content type. So this is just a nice way to enforce certain metadata fields that you want to make sure are applied to all content. And sensitive information, there are a number of companies that I'm talking to and have worked with that are leveraging SharePoint SharePoint 2010 to also be able to handle some of the sensitive information that may come in and out of their business. So what we mean by sensitive information, PII, HIPAA content, and for the federal government, any content that has a higher level of security classification or are classified documents. So by being able to highlight these different pieces of content, you're able to have a lot more control on who's able to search for it, who's able to retrieve it. You can apply certain workflow to it to make sure that it goes through the proper channels and is handled the appropriate way so that you're not violating any privacy laws that your company may be subject to. The records, very similar. There might be certain documents, certain artifacts within your company that are subject to specific retention schedule to make sure that the content is being audited and or can be aggregated for audit and have a specific archival schedule applied to it. So some content within SharePoint, it might be very easy. It can stay there for a couple of years and you can just delete it. You know, it's inconsequential to the makeup and the direction and the legality of your company's operations. However, there are other documents that are specific records that require specific retention schedule and policies being applied. So this is very important, and by taking all of these different records as a different content type, you're able to apply a workflow and ensure that you're leveraging some of the record center features that come with SharePoint 2010 and make sure that the content is aggregated for auditing when it's necessary and appropriate from any legal or governance standards. And our last content type is for policies. So I used this in my example earlier in the presentation, but the World Internet Challenge conducted a survey in this year, and the output is that sharing policies is still one of the most valued uses for an intranet across the country, also across the world. So it's definitely still sharing, it's sharing some information to all of us that, companies are still looking to their intranet to make sure that employees can access and can review different company policies. This means is if we're able to create a content type, not only are we able to control the consistency of its look and feel and making sure that applies to other company policies, but we're also able to make sure we can aggregate them. So there might be distributed management of these policies. Different offices in one country may control certain policies versus the headquarters that's located in another country. Ultimately, at the end of the day, users want to be able to come to one single location and just view the policies. They just want to see them and they want to go there. So having a content type designed for policy allows you to aggregate those policies that might be located in different document libraries or within different site collections and maybe spread out throughout your SharePoint farm. So we're developing your new content type, and I hope that this conversation helps get you thinking as to, all right, we need to start working through content types. What are some of our most key reusable pieces of content that we could do to create some policies against and create different management policies against to help improve the consistency and the accountability of the different documents. So your type should help to improve the user experience for content creation and management. And also remember that you want to think of different ways that distributed content can be aggregated or browsed or filtered in different ways. So these are all still important features as to why you would want to start creating a content type. And also, another motivation could be to ensure that proper metadata fields are being applied. So it's just kind of a little cycle that I've come up with to help with some of the new, developing new content type life cycle. So you need to really identify what your business needs are and what the content type, what different content types could be. So I started thinking through the idea you want a new policy content type. You need to ask yourself, will that content type be reused in many lists or will it be used in many libraries? And so if this is a yes, then you can go ahead and start building out the content type, building out what the settings are going to be, what features it needs to have, and what metadata will be associated with it. Then you go and apply that content type across your SharePoint site collection and make sure that it's added to the list or the library that it's intended to be associated with. And remember that, as you go through this process, there's going to be some trial and error. You're going to probably create it and realize, oh, we need to change this, we need to add that. So those processes continue to evolve. But you want to make sure that you're always applying and you're building your content types at the root site collection level. Making sure that, when you make a change, too, you make it at that root level so it applies to any instance where that content type is applied. So to wrap up with just a few nuggets on, best practices for our content types. Really, content types are a construct to apply structure to unstructured content. So it's still unstructured content, but we're trying to provide a little bit more consistency to it, and we're trying to provide a little bit more structure to make it easier for us to find this content or manage it because it's special. The greater likelihood for reuse of your content type is the equation for the greater use case. So as you think through what would be a good content type, definitely think through how often are we going to reuse this? Who uses this? How common is this? Is this too specific? Is this too generic to be a content type? And greater likelihood for its reuse, greater likelihood or the greater use case for it to be a content type. Remember to build your content types at the root level of your site collection. And the next two best practices directly relate to that because you can synchronize your content types with other site collections. So if you have a larger farm and you want to have a centralized area to manage your content types from one site collection, you can always synchronize them through a job by running a job to make sure that you have one centralized area for management. And also remembering that any changes that you apply to your content type within a collection will automatically propagate down to wherever that content type is applied in the same collection. Finally, the last piece is that content types really should be used as another means to implement your information governance. Last session that we had in this webinar series was about applying governance to SharePoint 2010. And I hope that some of you who are repeat visitors to our webinar series had a chance to start thinking through what your information governance strategy is going to be for SharePoint 2010. Think using content types as another way to implement that and make sure that content management is being thoroughly applied and that retention schedules are being complied with. That wraps up my session on demystifying content types, and this is, I hope, going to flow very nicely into the demonstration that John Chalice is about to give us. But I'm going to hand this back over to Don.
Excellent.
Introduce John. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. And so if everybody hasn't figured it out, you can ask a question. We are going to save those for the end, except that I do have one that I want to throw out there right now, and that's that somebody asked when they have a bunch of documents already in a site collection, can you retroactively apply the content type to them? Now, I mention that because that's really what John's going to be demonstrating in just a moment. And so, again, with a tool like Concept Classifier, which will make that process, the answer is yes. Alternatively, if you don't have a tool that will automate the process, you can add that content type to the site collection or site that you're working with. The issue is then the end users have to manually go in and select the content type as well as the appropriate metadata, and then cross fingers and hope that they apply it consistently. And of course, that's the problem that most companies have, and that's exactly the problem that John is going to show here we actually solve. Now with that, again, I'd like to go ahead and reintroduce John Chalice, who is the president, or I should say the CEO and founder of Concept Searching, and actually take you through an exercise working with content types, how to automate the process of updating content types, which will also auto-apply the metadata to the content, and then take it actually a step further and step outside of the SharePoint framework to see how this might work, or I should say, well, at least talk about how it would work in, say, something like file shares. That said, John, hopefully you're unmuted, and I'll pass it over to you and take it away.
Thank you, Don. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show how we can utilize term sets stored in the term store to encode various metadata structures, and utilize those structures, first of all, to auto-classify documents with metadata, and secondly, utilize that metadata to perform a variety of actions on the documents. And those actions can be to change a document's content type once we know what sort of document it is. So the whole demonstration from scratch, including all of the configuration steps, just to demonstrate how simple it is to perform these types of actions. The thing to think about is that here we are in the term store SharePoint, and we're going to be working with this workflow set. But of course, nothing in SharePoint that allows us to perform any kind of auto-classification, because Microsoft only gives us the option of manually tagging documents, and want to automate that. We need a product like Concept Classifier for SharePoint. Out of that product, we have our own taxonomy manager. Read term store structures directly out of the term store. So the same work structure that we were looking at a moment ago. But the big difference is that now I can create a set of auto-classification rules for each of these entries. For example, under my RMS entry here, I've got a set of rules to attempt to identify when a document is talking about the use of asbestos, especially in sealing products or architects products. I've got some vocabulary around that subject. I've got a PI topic, which is personal identifiable information. And that I've got nested a number of topics, such as a regular expression pattern, which will locate a social security number if it appears within a document. We've got some other simple PI detections, such as mother's maiden name. We're also looking for credit cards. So I've got a variety of patterns for different credit cards. And these feed up to the PII topic, which itself has no classification rules. It's simply a aggregation of all of the topics below. So if a document qualifies as being about any of these subtopics, it will be as being about PII. There we are with our classification system. But as I mentioned, what we want to be able to do is to perform some actions on documents when those classification decisions are detected. So I'll go to settings within the root of my site collection. You can see that we've got a concept classifier set of options here. What I use right now is the actions manager. There, we can see that no actions have been set up, because we're doing this demonstration completely from scratch. First thing I need to do is to create the actions that I want to use. And if I go to that form, you can see that I've got a variety of action types built into the standard product. 5 permissions for a SharePoint item. I can be an item. I can document content type. I can go out to an external Oracle database or SQL Server database or something similar and pull out relevant metadata fields and those fields to populate SharePoint properties. And then finally, I can synchronize that external database. change is made in either data source, either the original backend data source or the SharePoint environment, if read-write is enabled, then the data can be synchronized automatically so that the two copies are kept the same. First is I'm going to create an action to copy any PII documents to a particular location. So call it PII copy. Select the copy item type, and I can see the full SharePoint site structure that I have available, and it's easy for me to navigate that structure and to pick the location, in this case the PI library, where PII documents to be put. And to other topics, so an asbestos copy action, very similar to the previous one. But this time, if a document is classified as being about asbestos, matching my records clue, then I move it into the IS folder, because I decided that such documents should be treated as a record rather than simply as a document. Finally, I'm going to do an asbestos type update. In other words, I'm going to change the content type and force the application of an appropriate content type when a document matches this important criteria. And down below, I can see all of the content types available in my system, clustered by type, and it's very easy for me to select the one that I want to use, which in this case is going to be the record content type. And then creating my SharePoint actions and are now available to be utilized within my workflow manager, which is what I'm going to demonstrate next. Is where we decide what actions should be performed on documents when certain classification decisions are made. And again, we're starting from a completely empty situation here. There are no workflows defined. So what I need to do is to create my first workflow by clicking the Add New Workflow link. And just catch up, there we are. And the workflow can be configured to operate on all types of documents, or I can restrict the workflow, only work on file system documents, web documents, or SharePoint documents. In this case, this is a SharePoint-centric presentation. I choose that this workflow should only operate on SharePoint sources. And then having done that, it says, do I want to apply this workflow to all of my SharePoint sources, or do I select a particular source? Select this particular source so that only that source will be affected by this workflow. And let's give it a name, which I'm going to make PI copy. And our first workflow item. Well, I need to configure the workflow. And workflow consists of two steps. Well, I need to decide what conditions will trigger the workflow. I'm presented with a list of the available taxonomies, and I choose the workflow taxonomy. I'm presented with the structure of the workflow taxonomy, and I select the PI entry classified option, because I want this workflow to fire every time a document is classified as being about PI. And then I need to configure the actions. And a variety of actions can be configured. We've got an output to Twitter action. We've got a migration action, which can move a document between sources. So, for example, you can configure a migration workflow. We'll move documents from the file system to SharePoint 2010, for example, based on a classification decision that decides what that document is about. Or we can SharePoint 2007 to SharePoint 2010, using a migration workflow. Email, for example, maybe we want to alert an administrator where a document containing healthcare results has been detected, for example. And because this is a SharePoint demo, I'm going to choose the SharePoint actions. And so, those actions are just created using the concept classifier actions manager appear automatically in the list for me to select from. I choose the PII copy action and add that. And I need to do to configure my PII workflow and further the workflow for that asbestos record type. So again, I'm going to choose asbestos as my source. I'm going to choose that single site collection to operate on, and I call this asbestos. Similar to before, I have to configure my condition. This is going to be using the workflow taxonomy and the S type. Document is classified. Once that topic, then this workflow will fire. And I'm going to add my actions, which again is going to be a SharePoint action. First of all, I'm going to choose the asbestos CTU because I want to change the content type to a record content type. I want to perform a second action on asbestos documents. I'm going to choose Add New Action and that move operation as well. But I want to perform two actions on asbestos documents. I'll change the content type and to move the document or copy the document to the RMS library. And I configure our workflows. So the only thing that remains for me to do is demonstrate this in action. I've got a little section in SharePoint. I've got a shared documents library, which you can see is completely empty. I've got a PII library where I want my PII documents to end up, and again, it's completely empty. An RMS library where I want my records to end up. But all of the locations are empty. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to upload a batch of documents using bulk upload. And we'll just when we do that. Unfortunately, I've got a little set of suitable demonstration documents. And if I just click OK, we can upload those as a single operation. A server, these documents going across the internet. So it's going to take half a minute or so to upload those 8 documents in SharePoint. So a moment to finish.
Just a user perspective, pragmatically speaking, everything that we've shown here today, literally you've actually created it from scratch. There hasn't been anything here that's been pre-built. You're actually leveraging all of this just from building it out from scratch, correct?
That's what I'm endeavoring to do in the demonstration is. So I guess the taxonomy structure itself pre-existed and classification rules. But in terms of the workflow, yes, we've created the actions from scratch. We've created the workflows from scratch. And now we're going to see what happens when we upload some documents. So
and then when you said taxonomy there, just to one more clarification on the taxonomy, was that custom taxonomy or where was that? Was that coming from the term store? You were using something pre-existing. Is that something that's custom, that has to be built custom specific for SharePoint 2010, or is that just the native SharePoint 2010 term store?
Well, we're utilizing the standard term store, but the two examples I'm utilizing here are personally identifiable information or sensitive information more generally. And so the idea of what constitutes a record. And those things will vary from organization to organization. For example, most organizations, the presence of a social security number or healthcare results would constitute personally identifiable information. I've got many other kinds as well. So, for example, an organization focused on the manufacture of arms would be concerned about the International Traffic in Arms regulations or ITAR regulations, severe penalties for organizations that allow ITAR documents to be attributed to an inappropriate audience. For official use only documents, particularly within government organizations, would be considered sensitive documents. With the intelligence community, for example, a lot of documents are shared, but many are shared on a very controlled basis, and some are not shared at all. Those are all examples of documents which need to be tightly controlled, and where this kind of workflow might be important to stop inadvertent disclosure of inappropriate material. If you look at the issue of records management, every company will have its own view of what constitutes a record. So I've chosen the asbestos in Artex ceilings as just one example of what might constitute a record.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the clarification.
While we've been talking, these documents have been uploaded into SharePoint, and you can see that right now, under the IPSV property, there are no values, and under the workflow property, there are no values. But if you look at the classification date to the right of that, we can see that all of these documents are pending. And actually happened here is that an event handler has fired when these documents were uploaded. The searching server, which is completely separate from SharePoint server, notified that some documents have been uploaded. And it's gone in and retrieved these documents, put the documents to the available taxonomies, and automatically classified the documents, then pushed the resulting metadata into SharePoint properties. So I refresh my screen, you can see that most of the documents have got entries under IPSV and also under workflow, and the data values were generated completely automatically. You'll notice that the one document that was classified as being about Artex, which is Artex ceilings document, had its content type changed. On the far right here, you can see the content type for all of these documents is workflow, which is default for this library. But this document, which we've decided constitutes a record, has had its content type changed. And have a look in the PII folder, we can see that the two documents that were classified as being about PII or having PII in them have been moved to the PII library. And the Artex ceilings document, in addition to having its content type changed, has also been copied in the RMS location. Those are just some examples of the sorts of workflow that we can achieve. Particularly that content type updating functionality is a very, very powerful one because of the things that it drags with it. Remember Jill's presentation, by selecting the appropriate content type for a document, can apply a reusable collection of settings. And those things will include custom document properties, depending on what the content type is. The document templates as a result. It can affect the document access rights, so we can lock a document down potentially by changing its content type. And we can initiate a document workflow. So, for example, we could cause documents to be sent to the record center if they have a content type changed to the record content type, thereby automatically invoking the protection of the records management facilities if you've installed that product onto your SharePoint environment. Limited what we achieve, given that we can fully customize both the taxonomy structure, the actions, and the workflow rules. And that concludes the presentation that I wanted to make today.
John, and if you'll just stay on the line, we'd greatly appreciate it because we do have a couple of questions that we'd like you to share some feedback on. Jill, if you can actually slide back to PowerPoint, that'd be great as well. To recap, the webinar series is available on both PPC's public-facing site as well as Concept Searching's public-facing site. And really what we're doing is laying the foundation of the labs for SharePoint 2010. And from this, what we're going to do in 2012 is show you how to take this and use this as a means to build applications with SharePoint as the foundation. From a question perspective, first one I have is for John. The question is, can you assign two content types to a document in a site? Good question, and John, I'll pass that to you.
Well, equally, I think Jill could answer this one, but the answer is no. A content type, a document can only be associated with a single content type. Although that content type may have a position in the hierarchy of content types and therefore could inherit certain properties from its parent content type, nonetheless, each document can only be assigned a single content type.
Excellent. Next question is for John again. And again, I think this is relatively speaking easy. Can use the same term set in multiple content types. So now we're actually talking about actually leverage a term set across multiple content types. Again, can you take that, John?
So yes, basically you can have any number of term sets created in the term store, and then you can allocate those term sets either to individual content types, and you can certainly allocate the same term set to multiple content types. The nice thing about that is that any document that derives from those content types will automatically have those managed metadata properties associated with them. But in addition to the ability to assign columns based on term sets to content types, you can also allocate them to physical lists and libraries. So if you have a test library or a test site collection and you want the site columns associated with the terms only to appear in that one physical location, they map on that basis as well. This is all standard SharePoint configuration capabilities, but it's very flexible and very powerful.
Also, if I can also add that leveraging term sets for content types as well as applying term sets to lists and libraries really are the best practice for managing your information across SharePoint 2010. So having that set list of values, it will create greater consistency, greater findability, and you can also leverage those structured lists or those controlled vocabularies as potential facets when you're searching for content.
Excellent. Thank you, Jill. And speaking of you, actually the next one is for you. And so we defined the 4 standard content types. How if you need to build additional content types, and is there a specific number that most companies go towards? I just figured with all of your deployments, probably a great question to you, Jill, and let you share.
Well, 4 key content types that we talked about in this presentation really are, the bare minimum. If you are just looking to simply roll out some very basic content types that are going to help your information management and help the structure of your content within SharePoint, those 4 key content types are really a great place to start, because it's going to give you really well-balanced means of making sure you're applying metadata to content, making sure you're complying to strict needs for sensitive information, making sure that you are applying records management schedules to the records that may exist, and making sure you're highlighting policies for your users depending on the content management strategy. So that's a great place to start, but companies can really have upwards of 15, 20 different content types, and it really depends to what level you are going to be designing your content management strategy. So when I say 15 to 20, it probably sounds like a lot, but some of those content types may only be used for certain departments. They may only be used for a certain collection that has a specific use to it. So again, and also some of those content types might be for different SharePoint objects. So one might be for blogs, article pages. One could be a publishing page for the site collection that is externally facing. There could be content types for just the intranet section. There could be content types for your team sites. So there's a lot of variety, and I wouldn't even, I'd like to give a number to anyone to stay within or under per se, because again, it's just another utility that provides additional structure to unstructured content.
Well, Jill, that is it. We do have a couple other questions that we're actually going to just send that out as an email to everybody who actually attended today. We'd like to thank everybody for attending our expert webinar series. And again, if you'd like to see the previous webinars, you can get those online either at our corporate website or PPC's. We are going to be, again, continuing the webinar series for 2012, but now we've laid down the foundation. Really what we're going to focus on in 2012 is how do we apply that. And so we'll actually be setting up webinar series around the record centers, as well as other applications that you can leverage metadata, and again, SharePoint as a foundation, build out corporate applications. When we set up this email, if there's some suggestions where you'd like to see specific applications or, again, specific topics you'd like to have more details on, please feel free to forward that back to us, and we'll take that into consideration as we build out the webinar series. But again, with that said, I'd like to thank my colleagues, John Chalice and Jim Min, for presenting today. Everyone have a great afternoon, and we'll look forward to seeing you in 2012.